welcome to NAPOD, where we provide NA speaker meetings and workshops in a podcast. We are an ad-free podcast, and if you enjoy listening, please help us to be self-supporting by visiting napod.xyz, look for the donate link, and drop $1 or $2 in the virtual basket. If you're also in AA or have friends that are, please tell them about our other podcast, Sobercast. Sobercast features AA speakers and workshops in the same format as NAPOD. We upload a new speaker every day, and it's easy to subscribe by searching for Sobercast, that's 2 words, on any podcast player app, or go to Sobercast.com. Enjoy the podcast, and thanks for listening.
Hello, family. I'm an addict named Sharon. Should I say a grateful addict named Sharon? I'd like to just take a moment just to thank God for this day. You know, I want to thank the God of my understanding for every experience that I've ever had in my life. You know, I want to thank God for the ups, the downs, the ins and outs. You know, I want to thank God for every person that I've ever met. You know, I know that I stand here today as a result of every place that I've ever been, every person that I've ever met. I don't like this microphone. Every experience that I've ever had. And you know what? Today I am so overwhelmed with gratitude. You know, I need to say that I'm an addict from the East Coast. You know, yes. And when, you know, our literature tells us that this is a worldwide fellowship, and that is the truth. You know, it talks about in one of our pamphlets, the group that we travel long distances to carry this message. You know, and I'm here in Anchorage, Alaska. Yes. And I need to say that the Anchorage, Alaska Fellowship has carried us today. I'm talking about hospitality, unconditional love, support. I mean, thank you, Anchorage. Yes. You know, they showed up today and they showed out for us. And I am so grateful. You know, if you are new to Narcotics Anonymous, I welcome you. You know, when I got here, they told me that I was safe and that I never ever had to use again. So if this is your first meeting or your first convention, they told me when I got here, strap in, that I was in for the ride of my life. You know, and I am so eternally grateful for the process. You know, but today has been bittersweet for me. You know, we were coming back from our beautiful excursion. You know, and what I've really come to understand in my life today, that living life on its terms is real challenging some days. You know, and as we were coming home from such a beautiful day, you know, I got a call from the East Coast that we lost a member. You know, but she died clean. Like she got her eternity coin today. You know, so if we could just take a moment of silence for Michelle S. and her family and all of us who are left to grieve her loss. But her memory and her spirit grows on. So we could just have that moment now, please. Amen. And you know what? When I got the call, you know, I'm not one of those addicts that kind of plans what I'm going to share. Like I just pray and ask God to use me as His vessel. You know, but in that moment, what I got in touch with was that our next breath is not promised. You know, I'm talking about literally here today and gone today, and that is real. You know, and what I know about this disease that I live with for so many years, I took this gift for granted. You know what I mean? Like I'm here today to share my experience, strength, and hope. And what I know about active addiction, that active addiction has a job to do, and it is to kill us. You know, but Narcotics Anonymous gives us an opportunity to rewrite the script. You know, like if I were to leave here today, like my legacy would be so much different as a result of this program. You know, I am so eternally grateful for the wonderful life that this program has afforded me to live. Like I am not the woman that I was 21 years ago. I need to tell you that what stands before you is not who I've always been. You know, this is the transformation that Narcotics Anonymous promises us. You know, I was one of those addicts, and I need to say that I believe that I had this disease long before I picked up drugs. Like, I lived with the dis-ease on the inside of me. You know, I was a little girl who hated everything about myself. I was too tall. I was too black for my white friends, and I was too white for my black friends. You know, I hated myself. You know, I was always bigger than all the other kids in my classroom. And when the drugs came on the scene, it took me outside of myself. You know, and I'm the type of addict that I was gone from the first time. You know, there was never social using was not in my story. You know what I mean? Like, if I really tell the truth about me, I used to like pass out. You know, I was one of those addicts where one was never enough. You know, they say one is too many, and I believe for this addict that they didn't make enough for me. You know, the disease of addiction took me to a lot of places. You know, I had dreams and I had aspirations for my life. You know, I can remember being a little girl, and what I said is all I want is somebody to love me. You know, and I thought that one day that I would meet a man and we would have children, but what I know about this disease that we live with is has a job to do. And it is to rob us of every moral, every value, every dream that we have. You know, but God is so good, and I know this is a spiritual, not religious program, but I encourage you to get a relationship with the God. Because there's going to come a time in this process where the sponsor's not available, the support group's not there, and the only thing between you and the next one will be the God of your understanding. You know, but I can remember being a young girl, and I used to cry out like, I just wanted something that would love me and accept me for me. You know, and what I know about if you just put it in the atmosphere, that God hears it. And I don't know, like I've been really thinking a lot about my life and family, and God is good. He blessed me to be a mother. And I can remember when I was in my active addiction, you know, it's really hard to be pregnant and trying to get the next one. You know, the disease of addiction tried to not only take me out, but my unborn child. But you know, God is merciful. Because not only did he have his hand around me, that he also sheltered my children. And so I could remember crying out, not knowing that there was another way to live, and God heard my cry. And I can remember my first introduction to Narcotics Anonymous was back in 1987. You know, I went to that first Narcotics Anonymous meeting, and I read all the steps and traditions on the wall, and I ran home and told my husband at that time that I went to this meeting, and I was so excited. And I need to just thank that gentleman who planted the seed for me. You know, I didn't get clean back in 1987, but the seed was planted for me. You know, but I ran home and I told him that I had worked all 12 steps, and, you know, and didn't hear that alcohol was a drug. You know, I thought that if I just stopped using the drug that brought me to my knees, that I would be okay. You know, but the disease of addiction drugged me around the world. I mean, literally. You know, what I know is that everywhere I went, I took me with me. And I always thought that if I just went to another place, that I would be okay. You know, the disease of addiction landed me in Washington, D.C. You know, yeah, shout out to Washington, D.C. But I'm talking about, it was rough trying to get the next one there. You know, denial is a big part of my story. You know, like I always thought that I could stop. You know, I always thought that if anybody was going to figure out how to use successfully, it would be me. You know, and I can remember, you know, one of my biggest, I believe that my first addiction was to that of fantasy, and I always fantasized about how my life would be, and I can remember that if I just, you know, I would tell myself if I just met the right guy that I would be okay, and where else would I meet the man of my dreams but in a bar, and he is my husband today. You know, but I had dreams for my life, you know, and one of my dreams was not to be an addict. You know, I wanted to be something that my mother and father could be proud of, and you know, and I wanted to be the kind of mother that I didn't have as a mother. You know, I wanted to be a productive member of life, but this disease had me by the grips. The disease of addiction turned me into something other than my mother's child. And at the end of my addiction, like I said, denial was a big part of my story. And I used to say, you know, like, Like if I ever have to sell my wedding rings, I'll quit. And when I did that, I said, okay, if I ever have to sell the kids' toys, I'd quit. And when I did that, I said, okay, if I ever have to hit my knees for it, and I'm not talking about praying, I'll quit. And then when I did that, I said, wow, I had so much shame and guilt behind the woman that I had become. Here I was 8 months pregnant and going out to cop, and the drug guys would give me that look with disgust in their eyes, and they would say, like, how could you do that to your child? And I had so much shame, but I thank you ladies that were here when I got here. And you were talking honestly about who you were and how you used with your children. Because I thought that I had a moral deficiency when I got here, but thank God that you began to introduce me to this language, and you told me that I didn't have a moral deficiency, but I was powerless over my addiction. That once I started the process, I couldn't stop. And I had this little girl, and I didn't know how to connect with her, and I had so much shame. Like, what kind of a woman would admit that she didn't even want her baby? But again, I thank you ladies for sharing honest. And you kept telling me to just keep coming, don't use. And I want to thank H&I, who came into that treatment facility faithfully, carrying this life-saving message that I never had to use drugs again. And at the end of the road, I'm talking about I was done. I had become something other than my mother's child. I was an animal. But you know what? Lost dreams awaken. And new possibilities arise, So the disease of addiction landed me in Washington, D.C., and in the D.C. area late night, like 2, 3, 4 o'clock in the morning when all the drugs is gone, they always had those rehab commercials on. You know what I mean? Like, it's your brain fried on drugs. And I can remember this one particular night, like, I failed to mention that I came into this process a married woman. And me and my husband, like, we would lay in the bed late at night, and we used to say to each other, like, we're not going to always be like this. At the end of the road, suicide was an option for me, but I didn't have the courage. I did it a hit at a time, a bag at a time, like our literature talks about. And like I said, at the end of the road, my disease I really thought that if my husband would just leave me and the kids, because he was worse than I was. That if he would just leave me and the kids, that I could get clean and we would be okay. And I don't know if I convinced him or he was just ready to go, but when he left, I was able to see me for me. When my husband left, it's like now I don't have to go around the corner to turn the tricks. I brought the tricks home. I think it was in like 3 days later after my husband left that I ended up in the rehab. When I went to the rehab, it wasn't about, what am I going to do with the kids? It wasn't about what was I going to take. I was just so tired of living the way that I was living. I could remember a couple of days or, before we would go to bed at night, I would do the best that I could as a mother using. I would throw the kids something to eat. And I can remember this one particular night, we were sitting at the kitchen table. And the next morning, my son woke up with like disgust in his eyes, and he was like, are you still sitting there doing that? I couldn't stop. So I went into that rehab, and I thank God for H&I who came in there, and they told me, that I never had to use drugs again. But they told me that I needed to do some things, like I needed to get a sponsor, I needed to get a home group, and I needed to make an investment in the 12 steps. And that is where my recovery began for me. I'm not in the Step a Year Club. I believe that my only ammunition against this disease that I live with is the 12 Steps of Narcotics Anonymous. I'm a strong believer in one disease, one program, one sponsor. My book is basic, not big. I'm a purist in Narcotics Anonymous. And I started working steps from the beginning. And I had to take a look at my powerlessness, like using against my will. And it was easy to work the first step with the drug because that was real obvious that once I started it, I couldn't stop. But, I struggle with surrendering control today. And what I've come to find out is that I'm not alone. I'm a control freak. And I really believe if you would just do things my way, everything would be okay. But as a result of that kind of thinking, you're talking about having lived an unmanageable lifestyle. You know, the unmanageability shows its ugly head every time I try to have some control. You know, but I made an investment in the 12-step, and I started to look at the unmanageability in my life. And you know, and what happened for me is once I admitted that I was powerless, that there was a void in my life. You know, the literature talks about that, you know, once we admit that we're powerless, it leaves a void in my life. But the hardest area to work the program is when the void shows up. So you guys told me that I was going to need a God, but I got a man because the man was the God. You know, and one was too many and 1,000 wasn't enough. You know, because after putting the drug down, come in became the drug of choice. You know, and I was a married woman. You know, I was a married woman. You know, thank God for the process. You know, because today, I don't live my life like that today. Like, I am a woman of integrity. You know, and I believe in the institution of marriage. But early on in my recovery, you know, my husband was hundreds of miles away. You know, and I know today that I needed every experience that I've experienced to become the woman that I am today. You know, and so as a result of living like that, like I had to add some of you gentlemen on my 8-step list. Because I knew all along that I didn't want you. I was just using. You know, and what I really wanted was a healthy relationship with my husband. Like all I ever wanted was one man to love me for me. But because I came in here with some distorted beliefs about love and sex, you know, my first introduction to what I thought love was sex, and it was in my household. You know, and I sexualized every relationship that I've ever had. You know, and as a result of having low self-esteem, or should I say no self-esteem, I didn't even have the ability to choose. Like I went with whoever chose me. If you like me, then I like me. You know, and sometimes even recently, or should I say in recovery, if you don't like me, then I don't like me. You know, but I thank God for the process. You know, that when you hate me, I don't hate myself as much today. You know, so I had to come to believe in something different. You know, I had to come to believe that this program could possibly work for me. You know, so I had to come, and then I came to, and then eventually I came to believe in Narcotics Anonymous. You know, and as a result of like taking a look at the second step in my life, you know, I really recently started taking another look at my belief systems. You know, because I really believe today that we tend to live what we believe. You know, and what I used to believe when I first got here, like my whole belief has changed. You know, Narcotics Anonymous has given me a new perspective on my life. You know, but I'm telling you, I have found myself functioning out of some outdated belief systems. You know, I come from the era where, you know, I want to be treated like the queen that I am. You know, I'm a queen today. You know, and I want my door open. I want my door open. I want to be dropped off at the front of the market, not back at 20 blocks down. You know, but I gotta live in my own reality. You know, like that's not my reality today. You know, and I got to get some acceptance with that. You know, ladies and gentlemen, people tell us who they are. We're just not listening. You know, there's something inside of me that says that when you get with me, because I got the converter coochie, that I will change you. Seriously. And what I've come to understand is that I'm not alone. You know, and I'm telling you, and that kind of a belief system has really caused me a whole lot of problems. You know what I mean? Like, I want you to love me the way that I want you to love me, and when you don't, we have problems. You know, but I thank God for the principle of open-mindedness in the second step. That if I practice open-mindedness, anybody can restore me to sanity. So one Christmas, you know, I get into this fantasy about life, and, you know, I will always want to create the perfect scenario, and, you know, I want the house to be just right. And so my kids come home for the holidays, and, you know, and I do what I do. And I think those are some of the qualities and attributes about me that even attracted my husband to me, is that I've made the house a home. You know, in every season I change the flag outside. You know, he calls me Martha Stewart, and that's okay. You know, and so my kids came home for the holiday, and my fantasy, we all gonna sit down, you know, I'm gonna read, it was the night before Christmas, And I got really disappointed. But what does the literature tell us? Expectation bring about disappointment. So I had this unrealistic expectation about how I thought things should be. And so now I'm whining and complaining because I wrote the script but didn't tell people their part. And so my son, thank you, Narcotics Anonymous, for teaching me how to be a parent. My little ones grew up right here. We brought them to meetings. They sat in the front row. They used to pretend that they were sharing the meetings when we were setting up. And my son, who is 28 years old, is probably more mature than I am. And what he said to me, he was like, because I was saying, well, I feel unloved. And he said, Mom, you got to let people love you the way that they love you. Like he said, Mom, there's 5 languages of love. There's physical touch, there's gift giving, there's words of affirmation, there's spending time, and there's something else. And he said, I spent all day with you, which is how I showed you that I love you. And he was like, Mom, you got to let us love you the way that we love you. And that blew my mind. Really. That was so profound that people show love differently. I'm a gift giver. I'm probably all of it. Physical touch it means a lot to me. Words of affirmation, tell me you love me. But I got to allow my husband to love me the way that he loves me. He would give me the world monetarily. You want a new purse? You want a fur? But what I want is your time. Can you tell me that I'm pretty today? Can you tell me that you love me every day? He just ain't that guy. Doesn't mean that he doesn't love me. And I'm saying that I almost threw the gift away because I didn't get love the way that I felt like he should give it to me. I have a good man. I know a lot of you would love to have him. Seriously. Because a good man is hard to, and I have gotten in touch with that lately because our tomorrows aren't promised. And God is so good that, he has given me an opportunity to travel. I'm talking about literally seeing the world through Narcotics Anonymous. I just got off the boat. I went to the NA cruise, got off the boat Sunday. I was in the Bahamas in a bikini. And now I'm in boots in Alaska. I'm talking about, is that a life worth living? But when I was on that cruise, there was a sister on the cruise, and she was talking about, wanting to be married, and God gave her a husband, and 7 months later, he was gone. And God gives us opportunities to always find gratitude. And in that moment, what I said to myself is, even though, I love my husband 28 days out of the month. The other 2, I got to work the program. But if something were to happen to my husband, I don't know what I'd do. And I don't know, sometimes do I show him that I'm grateful enough for the gift that God has given me? Because I have something that some people never get in a lifetime. And so if you have a mate, if you have a mother, if you have a father, if you have a sister, if you have a child, if you have a sponsor, if you have a sponsee, let them know you love them today. Because the next moment isn't promised. I am so in touch with it. The gift is right here in this moment. And I thank God for sponsorship because I'm one of those addicts. I'm never satisfied, ever satisfied. Well, I'm not going to say ever, seldom satisfied. And I used to complain and whine to her a lot, and she would say to me, Sharon, this might be as good as it gets. And I was like, what? That's real. Like this right here in this moment might be as good as it gets. And so we need to cherish the moment. I thank God for every experience that I've ever had in my life. Because I know that I am the woman that I am today as a direct result of it. And so I came into this process and I heard a lot of people and they didn't tell me how much time I got. But I'm just going to kind of bring you up to where I've been this year. Like, I've worked a couple series of steps, and I'm not one of those people that believe when you get to 12, you stop. And when you get to 12, you go back. And I'm currently just finishing up my 8th and 9th step. And some of the hardest amends for me have been the financial amends. Because I don't know about you, I don't want to get off my money. You know, I told you earlier that I still live out of some outdated belief system that my money is my money and your money's our money. You know, and so I still struggle with the whole money thing. But what has happened this year is that, you know, God is doing a work in me with my permission. Because I want to be all that God would have me to be. You know, and I'm a taker. You know, literally a taker, like went to jail clean. Not, look, they will take you to jail for stealing. They don't care that you're in recovery. You know, and what I found out from my own experiences, they run your fingerprints electronically now. They don't have to even put ink on them. You know, but, you know, and I'm saying that to say that some of the financial amends have been some of the hardest for me. But this year, God was really dealing with me, and, you know, He has blessed me. You know, I am employable today. You know, and one is too many, and they don't make enough jobs either, you know. I'm really chasing money, property, and prestige this year. But I've been able to save money. You know, and I mentioned earlier about, you know, my sponsor. Well, Michelle, she used to be one of my sponsees, and when she got sick this year, like God laid it in my spirit to send her on a trip. And I'm talking about, I fought with that. I'm like, what? You know, what happens for me is that God whispers in my spirit. You know, and I used to remember, you know, when I was formerly working the 11th step, I used to say to my sponsor, like, how will I know God's voice? And she said, if you spend time talking to God long enough, you'll hear His voice. Just like I know your voice because you talk to me. You know, and so this one particular night, God was saying I needed to send her on a trip. And I'm talking about, I fought with that thing. But what I know is where God's trying to take me, He's taking me. And it's not for anybody else to understand. It's for me to understand. And so even when I shared it with my husband, he was a little resistant. Because, you know, my money's our money too. But I thank God for the obedience that I have today. You know, I didn't know that 3 months later she was going to be gone. You know, and so she had an opportunity to go on a trip that she may not have ever been able to experience if I had not listened to that small whisper. You know, and so she went on a trip, and not only did I send her mate with her because she was sick, and I knew she would need somebody to go with her. But I'm talking about Narcotics Anonymous. The fellowship is brutal. Like, it takes character to stay here, newcomer. You know, because when you start to grow spiritually, like y'all say grow spiritually, and when you begin to grow spiritual, sometimes the darts come. You know, but the bricks that have been thrown at me, I've used them for part of my foundation. You know, I've used every brick that came against me and put it in my foundation. You know, and I have stood flat-footed, like the fellowship questioned me. Like, why are you doing that? You know, I didn't ask for help. You know, God laid that on my spirit to do that. You know, and so I started to talk to my sponsor, you know, about the 8th and 9th step. And, you know, as my father was getting sick a few years ago, you know, I was going back and forth to my hometown. And when I was in that hometown, I caused a lot of harm. You know, our literature tells me that anybody that we come in contact is subject. You know, and so in my community, I hurt a lot of people. You know, and when I was relentless. Like, you come in my way, anybody's subject. You know, but as I would go home, like, you know, I had guilt. You know, and I started seeing this one sister's face. You know, I remember going to this dance this one particular night, and I had picked up the first one. Went into this dance, and I needed some money, and the purse was there, and I took it. You know, and I used to always wonder if she knew that I took the money. But I told my sponsor that when I go up there this time, that God laid it in my spirit that it was time for me to make financial amends again. I'm like, financial amends again? You know, and I was told to my sponsor, you know, thank God for sponsorship, because what I said to her, I don't know if it was $200 or $300, and when she said, well, with interest, it's probably $300 now. And I did whatever, because the 9th step says be willing to do whatever it takes to make right of the wrong. You know, until I went to the lady where she used to live, and her mother was there, and her mother told me where she was, and now fear kicked in, and I just began to pray for the willingness that God, you give me the willingness to walk through this. And so when I called her on the phone, I was like, hey, this is Sharon, you know, I'm in town, I want to see you. And she was like, well, my house is a wreck. I said, I don't even want to come in. Just give me 10 minutes. And when I went down, the literature tells us that when it's time to make the amends, that God will begin to set the stage. And so when I went down there to see her and I got out of the car, she looked old and she was haggard, and she was still drinking. And when I got out of the car, I wanted to beat her on the bush and, hey, how are you doing? And I just told her, when I was here 25 years ago, I stole your wallet. And we both started to cry. And she was like, no, Sharon, it's okay. And I was like, no, I need to do this. And I handed her the money. And I just thank God for the willingness, because as a result of that huge but small act, we began to rekindle an old relationship. What she said to me was that it was okay. But in that moment, what she said was that they were getting ready to turn my lights off. And I didn't know how I was going to pay the light bill. No, I don't know if she paid the light bill. But I'm saying God has set the stage for a vehicle for change to happen in her life. And so I am eternally grateful. I've been in the 8th and 9th step, and I talked about a little bit last night. I went on the NA recovery cruise, and I've been carrying around some unforgiveness. And 8 years ago, God is so good the way that he orchestrates my life. He knows the type of support that I'm going to need. That I would get the call today that my ex-sponsee died because he knew I was going to need all of you. Just like I got the call 8 years ago when I was getting off the plane to go to the World Convention in Atlanta that my brother took his life. And I can remember getting off that plane and I was so, and I'm saying all this to say, newcomer, we don't use no matter what happens in our lives. We play a game around here, it's called We Don't Use No Matter What. And I got off that plane and I was rallied and I was surrounded by the love of the fellowship. But I had a lot of unanswered questions, and, I was starting to question if my brother took his life, and, they said he hung himself on the fence, that he was shorter than. All you had to do was stand up. But I got on the cruise, and, when you go on a cruise, and if you've never been on a cruise, they have assigned seating for dinner. So every night you have dinner with the same group. And so the very first day I get on the cruise, there's a sister on the boat, and she said a week ago her brother committed suicide. And no one in her area had ever had that experience. And what I really have come to understand is that the experiences that we go through are not just for me. The experiences and the things that I have walked through are to help somebody else. And I was able to begin to share with her how I've been able to get through a brother committing suicide. And what she asked me was, would I go with her to spread her brother's ashes? And I'm talking about I have been able to be a part of some very intimate experiences. I would never have been able to do it if I hadn't been blessed with this wonderful gift. Because the disease of addiction is self-centered in nature. But recovery is about being selfless. It's about being of service. It's about serving today. And what I said to her was I would be honored. I want to meet your brother. And as I began to say my prayers, I began to thank God for using me. But that whole experience just started to open me up, to start to tell me that there was a lot of unforgiveness that I needed to let go of. And that, Sharon, I'm not using you. It's I'm using her to help me to heal. And so I need you people. I need you members. As I look around the room today, it is a wonderful thing to be hundreds of miles away, but I feel so connected to you. Our diversity is our greatest strength. And I was traveling around today, and there wasn't a lot of people like me where we were at today, but I felt safe, because I was surrounded by the love of the fellowship. So recovery has been really, really awesome for me. I have experienced a lot of highs and a lot of lows. But no matter what has happened, I have not found it necessary to use drugs. I had mentioned earlier that, God had blessed me to be a mother. And I knew nothing about raising children, and had a daughter. I mentioned her a little bit earlier. my daughter, I'm talking about, has more self-acceptance than I have today. You know, when she turned 15, in hindsight, I should have seen all the signs. You know, she told me that she was lesbian. And before that happened, a lot of lesbian women started coming into my life. Like, they started wanting me to sponsor them, and self-centeredness says they want me. Yeah, they want me. But what I know today was God was setting the stage for me, because I was going to need their experiences. You know, I needed them to tell me, like, what did you need from your mother? And what I learned was that I needed to learn how to practice the unconditional love. I can love you and hug you. Can you go home and hug your daughter? You know, and I felt so bad because I could only think of, I didn't get what I wanted as a daughter. How self-centered was that? Like, girl, don't you know I have dreams for your life? You know, I want you to do and be everything but my daughter is who she is. And she wears Timbs and not pumps. You know, she wears boxers and not thongs. And I'm talking about me and her, we have a relationship as a result of this program where I have been able to love her unconditionally. You know, and I thank my husband who has helped me, because there was a lot of days when I would be like, George, like she would come in with her hat to the side and I'd be like, oh my God. You know, but I have learned how to love her here, and I thank you sisters who helped me, you know, to love her. You know, and it's really been a challenge because, you know, it's not easy to live a lifestyle that goes against what society says is normal. You know, and she was depressed and she was suicidal, but she came to her mother. You know, and I was able to walk her through that, and I was able to nurture her and love her back to health. And I thank Narcotics Anonymous for that. You know, so I am so excited to be in Anchorage, Alaska. You know, and as we were riding today, I was saying to myself, like, how can you experience such beauty and say there's not a God? You know, only God can create the kind of beauty that we can see today. You know, that I have seen some beauty that brings tears to my eyes. You know, and so I am eternally grateful for this gift. You know, and what they say is that a grateful addict won't use, and I know that gratitude isn't in my words, it's in my actions. So if I say I'm grateful, how am I living today? You know, and I try to show my gratitude. You know, like, this is not what I do. Like, I'm not, you know, my husband's the speaker. You know, but for some reason, like, God is like pulling me out more. You know, and I'm very uncomfortable. You know, I don't believe this is my niche in Narcotics Anonymous. But you know what? I just show up and be willing to, like, tell my story. You know, that in and of itself has been a process. You know, like, I have had to share my husband with Narcotics Anonymous. You know, and there was a time that I had a resentment with the fellowship. You know, because Narcotics Anonymous was calling him to be of service. You know, but when I really look at it for real, like, my husband has touched lives in this program. You know, and when I see sometimes his Facebook page and the words of affirmations, you know, I'm like, he has touched lives. You know, and so how selfish of me to deny him to continue to do what God has placed in him to do, which is to be of service. You know, and so today I'm all right with it. I don't know about tomorrow. But just for today, like, I have acceptance with that. You know, that God is using him. You know, and when they called him to come to Anchorage, I said, oh, I'm going too. You know, I got my little couple dollars together and I said, I'm going. You know, because we can do that today. You know, but I'm excited to be here, and I want to continue to make some connections. You know, I was shared in the detox last night, and I was telling some of the members there that they tell us that the broader the base, the higher the point of freedom. Like, get phone numbers. Like, your phone bill might be high, but you won't be. You know what I mean? And use the numbers, because you never know where our paths may cross again. You know, and I was able to make a connection this weekend. And I know that God just knows what I need because, like, I met a sister, you know, because he knew I was going to need a sister, you know, and she prayed with me, you know. And so I just encourage you to keep coming. You know, the musical artists, we are skilled. I was listening to the rappers sing, and I was like, wow, we are some talented people if we just learn how to channel our energies in the proper direction. So, I'm not going to ramble. I want to thank you again for listening so intently. And with that, I'll pass.
Thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed the podcast. Please help us improve our ranking so others can find us by putting a review on Stitcher, iTunes, or your favorite podcast index. NAPOD is ad-free thanks to the folks supporting the show with $1 or more per month. If you enjoy listening, you can join them by going to napod.xyz and looking for the donate link. Thank you for listening. Have a great day.